Your 401k is financial suicide. Yes, I said it. And the math I'm about to show you will make you want to punch a hole in your HR manager's office wall. By the end of this video, you're gonna see why Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, and every other billionaire laugh at the idea of retirement accounts. They're using private banks, oil investments, and tax loopholes your financial advisor isn't even allowed to whisper about. But first, riddle me this. If 401ks are so great, why are most Americans retiring completely broke? Why are people working until they die, eating cat food and clipping coupons? Because the system is rigged. Wall Street wins, you lose, the government gets their taxes. So let's go ahead and break it down. By the way, guys, if you're brand new to my channel, all I do here is teach you guys how to build wealth like a true capitalist, be able to be your own bank, acquire cash flowing assets, and learn the things that this small little sector of the financial industry does not teach you and is too illiterate to actually know. So let's talk numbers. Let's say you're 30, you max out your 401k for 35 years at $22,500 a year, and maybe with an employer match, you get 25K. That's $875,000 contributed, which sounds great, right? But let's be generous. 7% average return, and at age 65, that's 1.8 million. But here's what they don't tell you about. Inflation tax. That 1.8 million will only buy what about $600,000 does today. You already lost 1.2 million. And here's the real tax. You pull money out, you're taxed at ordinary income, not capital gains. So say you're in a 25% tax bracket, and now you're at $450,000 in real spending power. That's time tax. You can't touch your own money for 35 years unless you pay a 10% penalty. That's not saving, that is a financial prison, and you've just been taught differently. Nobody thinks about this. You work for 35 years, you contribute almost 900 grand, and after inflation and taxes, you're left with maybe 400,000 in today's money. That's not wealth, that is what we call legalized stupidity, dressed in mutual fund wrappers and HR pamphlets. See, guys, one of the biggest misconceptions that we have been taught to believe is true is retirement accounts. If you are locking your money away for 30 or 40 years and you have no ability to access it without fees, it makes no sense, because there's other assets you can go into, which we're going to talk about in a little bit here, where you can have your money multiply faster with better tax incentives and be able to actually access it and leverage it and not have tons of risk while doing it. So while the financial advisors and the government makes money collecting taxes and management fees, you're really the one that gets the short end of the stick. And if we look at the last 100-year history of the United States, we see 2.5% to 3% inflation. So look at an investment that's locked away for 40 years at 3% inflation. You have 120% loss to inflation. So you have to have exponential growth to outweigh how much your money actually is going to be able to purchase after that 40-year period. Nobody looks at that. So you have to look at the speed to deploying capital. You have to look at how much you're losing to inflation. And then you have to look at the big tax payday that the government gets when you go to withdraw. It makes no sense. So little pattern interrupt. We're going to get straight back into it here, but later on, we are going to talk about assets that create more leverage, less taxes, and appreciate sooner later on in this video. So here's what the wealthy do instead. While you're locked into a 401k trap, the rich are playing a whole different game. They use a strategy you might have heard called infinite banking, and here's how this works. So step one, you fund what is called a high early cash value dividend paying whole life policy. Now I'm going to break a misconception right here. 95% of insurance sold to you is a complete scam. And 95% of insurance that is sold by financial advisors in the United States are what we call term, which has no cash value and no wealth building benefits to you, or they're what's called an index universal life policy or a variable universal life policies. These have hidden insurance costs. They typically only grow at 5 to 6% in annual returns, and you cannot borrow against them. So what I use is the same type of policy the big banks buy. And there's only a few dozen advisors in the entire United States that are even allowed to sell these. So that's why you got to have the right connections and know this stuff, because if you know what JCPenney, Ray Kroc, and Walt Disney did to build their empires, then you can do the exact same thing. The policy that I have grows at 8 to 12% every single year, and I've never actually myself made any less than 10% annually fully insured. So while y'all are investing in high yield savings accounts where you have to pay taxes, I'm invested in something that is insured, grows at 10%, and I can borrow against. So step two, you borrow against this cash value insurance policy. What I mean by that is if you go into a VUL or an IUL, what all the insurance advisors have been licensed licensed to sell and incentivized to sell, which, by the way, these policies typically pay them 80 to 90% commissions. They make more money for them than they do for you, right? You get a HEC V policy and you're able to actually borrow against it. So let's just say in one hand, I've got $10,000 of cash value here, okay? And this is growing at 10% every year. So in the second year, I've made $1,000 on that. It's now worth 11. And then I make 1,100, so it's now worth 12,100, and it keeps going on. I have a line of credit against that. So this keeps going up in value, and every year I increase that line of credit. This is growing at 10%, but my line of credit is only 4, 5, 6% interest only. So every year I'm increasing my leverage. And then the next step is this. You deploy those funds into real cash flowing assets. Oil wells that throw out 30 to 40%, real estate syndications, even precious metals to hedge against inflation. And now your original capital is still compounding inside the policy, and your borrowed capital is earning returns outside of the policy. Your money's doing double duty, double the work. That's how Walt Disney built Disneyland. That's how Ray Kroc scaled McDonald's. That's how JCPenney built his retail business. But your advisor won't mention this because he gets paid to keep you in the Wall Street hamster wheel. So now that you understand how to get set up, and by the way, I'm going to include some of the resources below in the description for you to get started. Let's talk about oil. This is the asset class that makes 401ks look like monopoly money. So here's what I love about oil. And one misconception here, I'm not talking about paper stocks or oil stocks or anything like that. I'm talking about the hard asset itself, investing directly into an oil and gas well. Okay? What happens with this is you have so many different tax deductions, and this is why I like this. If you invest, let's just say for a random number, $100,000, in the year that you invest, you can write off as high as 80 to 85% of the investment capital. What that means is if you made $200,000 in this year and you invested $100,000 into oil, you can write off up to 85% of that investment, which means you're getting an $85,000 tax deduction on your earned income. So instead of paying taxes on $200,000 that you earned that year, you're only paying taxes on $115,000. It immensely lowers your tax basis. Then you have what's called the tangible drilling costs. This actually allows you to have deductions on the cash flow that these oil wells pay you. And then on top of that, you have what's called a depletion allowance, which means that every dollar an oil well you're invested in earns cash flow. The tax basis is only 85 cents on the dollar. So you have such minimal taxes. You're able to write off investment capital, and you have all these immense deductions on the actual cash flow of the oil well. And if you're in the right type of fund, like the funds I invest in, you can actually exit these oil wells, which means you cash flow them for 3, 5, 6, maybe even 7 years. And then this production of the oil well, the future production, what is pumping out of the ground, oil and natural gas, is sold to a bigger oil company for a multiplier, and that gets you another payday. And you can even 1031 that payday into the next oil deal. And that is why I love oil so much. That's why wealthy, legendary capitalists have always invested in oil. So let's look at an example. Let's say you invest $100,000 and you get a $75,000 deduction. You end up saving $26,000 in taxes, assuming, let's say, you're in a 35% tax bracket. Your real cost is $74,000. That's a 47% return on actual capital, plus the tax advantages that you get, and you own real production, not a ticker symbol on CNBC. So let me show you what I am actually doing, okay? $200,000 whole life policy. $180,000 line of credit. Keep in mind that line of credit's at 4% interest, whole life's compounding at 10% annually, all right? So I go $150,000 into oil, producing $4,500 a month, about $54K a year in cash flow. My tax write-off, $120,000 deductible, saving $42,000 in taxes. My net out of pocket is $108,000. My annual return, $54,000 a year. That's 50% on actual capital. And guess what? My policy's still growing, and my line of credit resets as I level it up, and I do it again and again and again. Meanwhile, your 401k might crawl to 7% or 8%, and you can't even touch it for decades. Guys, if you're loving what you have learned so far, smash that like button. And again, if you're brand new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, because I'm dropping videos every single week on how to build wealth out of the modern financial system via oil, real estate, exotic cars, and all the ways that legendary capitalists of the past and present have used to build real wealth, not what your advisor charges you for, earning 8, 9, 10% a year. I don't get it. Like, why listen to people that don't have money about what to do with your money. The average financial advisor makes $110,000 a year in America, which means they are broke and they have no personal wealth. So don't be another casualty of the system. Make sure to subscribe if you're brand new and smash that like button right now. Now, I'm not saying cash out your 401k today, but stop feeding into a machine that was never built for you. If you want real strategies, not Wall Street fairy tales, then I'd recommend that you join the Capitalist Network. And I'm actually gonna include a link in the description and invite you to a 7-day free trial. You probably are wondering what TCN actually is. It is all of the investment partners that I use and the people that we help use to build their wealth. Now, we meet you where you're at, regardless of if you have a few $100s a month or you're making millions and millions of dollars and need to deploy into tax efficient strategies. We meet you where you're at and help you from one walk of life to the other, regardless of if you're young, old, somewhere in between. If you simply want to start strategizing better and not only learn, but get the mentorship, get the support, and have the actual funds to go into, whether it be oil or real estate, lowering your tax basis, all of that stuff, that is what we teach inside TCN. So there is a link in the description. It's no cost to you. It's a 7-day free trial. If you like it, stay. If you don't, at least you learned something and you got it for free. The math doesn't lie, guys. Your 401k isn't helping you build wealth. It's helping Wall Street get richer, okay? So while you're hoping for a 7% return every year for 35 years, the producer class is making 30 to 50% with full tax shields and cash flow. Appreciate you guys. Make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.